All right, good morning and welcome to Mediatel's Future of Audio panel session. Today I have a very auspicious panel. We have a couple of leading media owners. We have Marco Bertozzi from Spotify and Rhian Rummery from Global. And to complement them, we have two agency planning leads with a bent for audio in Rhian Feather from OMD and Mesha Williams from MediaCom. So welcome to the four of you to our virtual round table. Let's pretend we're all round a table today. Audio's been doing very well in the recent strange times we find ourselves in, and it also has enabled the events business to see a time that has really struggled. And again, in fact, one of our event friends decided to move their event to October and then move it totally out of this year. And one of the reasons they stated for doing this was that creative agencies particularly, and indeed all communication agencies, wouldn't be able to produce their best work. I thought this was strange because actually I've seen some extraordinary work done very quickly over the recent times, and extraordinary circumstances sometimes produce extraordinary work. Marco, have you seen any new approaches to creativity that have grabbed your attention, or anything particularly in the audio space that's come out in recent time that's made you think that people are going beyond the call of normal work?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. Really pleased to be part of this roundtable. I mean, just taking a step back, I would say I feel, my response to that would be the complete opposite. And I think, I feel like we could be indeed at the start of some sort of golden era of advertising. Perhaps, whether that's audio or in totality is neither here nor there. But I think there's that lovely quote. I think it's like necessity is the mother of invention. And, I think these times have made everyone, I'm sure everyone on this round table has had to rethink how they've gone about things and think about how they could be more creative about what they're doing. And I think, from an audio perspective, I think it's definitely, we're seeing how the brands are reacting to this now. We're like, audiences are sort of settling into their ways of existing, I guess. And we've seen audiences settle into routines. So we're kind of seeing, at Spotify, we're sort of seeing these patterns that we sort of describe as every day is like Sunday. Meaning like the way people are listening at the moment is very similar to how we used to see people listening on Sundays. So a lot more devices being used to listen, and they're listening more out loud, more collaboratively, more in groups. And that kind of how they're listening, like being more nostalgic, the content they're listening to around family and kids and ents, all those topics, well-being, we're seeing tons of well-being and generally quite feel good, like positive vibes. What we're starting to see now is the brands reacting to that and responding to that in loads of different ways. We had this example of Amstel. It's a really small example, very simple, but gives you an idea that really took off in Spain of using, they created a playlist of sounds of bars and restaurants, like literally, the background that people could put on when they're sort of sitting around, and that took off. Like you would never have imagined it, but it really took off. So I think people are thinking differently. The Trolls campaign just came out, and they did turn that around really quickly. And I think, in summary, what I like about it is I think it's more about traditional planning. I think it's more about strategic planning and traditional planning and using gut instincts and feel now. And I think that's what creative agencies are brilliant at. And I think people are thinking more about context than about audiences. I mean, that to me is a big thing. Like, let's advertise to the context people are in, and less focused on the minutiae of what the target audience is and so on.
Yeah. Okay, Mesha, you're someone who works in an agency, and contextual planning is something you must be thinking about every day of your working life. Have you seen? Would you agree with what Marco's saying there? Is there more chance to use gut instinct at the moment? Are you able to work with creative partners to change briefs?
Yeah, like I completely agree with what Marco said. What we're finding is companies are just trying to do the right thing during this crisis. Globally, we're facing unprecedented societal, health, and economical challenges, and our priorities have shifted. If we're looking at what a lot of the clients are doing, their contribution is more meaningful. And you're seeing a clear shift in the immediate you're seeing a clear and immediate shift in the type of messaging they are communicating. So if we look at Tesco's, for example, they very quickly repurposed their messaging to adapt to the current climate. They went from promoting food love stories to focusing on how they are going to serve the community. This included creating ads around social distancing and designated shopping times for the NHS workers, the elderly, and the vulnerable. And I think they were able to turn this around within, I think it was 12 to 24 hours as well. And from an editorial perspective, information sources such as traffic and travel news have had to adapt to promoting the government's stay-at-home guidelines whilst offering bespoke essential content for the key workers and NHS teams who are still having to travel. So I don't think that the festival being pushed back is because creative agencies and media agencies aren't able to create outstanding work. I just think at the moment our priorities have shifted, and we have to adapt to it and just make sure that the things that we are communicating resonates with those listening, to audio. People are tuning in more and more, so we're seeing Global and Bauer, delivering great reach recently, and people are tuning in for that valuable source of information, the reassurance, and the company. And we're just going to have to adapt to that over the next few weeks and months and focus on that.
Thanks so much. And Rhian, again, have you seen powerful work? I think yes, some of the government work is obvious to cite as powerful audio work. What else have you been listening to, whether it be something which is tactical or something which has been more contextual, as Marco was saying?
I think it depends on what you mean by powerful work. Anything that is talking about pandemic that the majority of the population has never lived through is bound to be quite powerful. And I think the people that moved really, really quickly right at the start, I think it was even more powerful, even if it was just as the CEO or businessmen from Barclays talking about how they're looking after kind of the country. However, I don't think that's the question you want me to answer. So I do have another answer. It's very weird listening to the radio and not hearing loads of jingles. There's no music, no long-winded terms and conditions. It's actually quite refreshing to be listening to audio ads at the moment. My personal favourite is Voiceover Artists United. Essentially, it's the same powerful message. They're all coming together. I think it's a really nice, very unique opportunity for everyone. Everyone wants to say stay at home. Everyone wants to say carry on talking. So it just means that everyone's more likely to collaborate together. So there is, I don't know if you've heard it, but you've got the X Factor Man, the Mind the Gap voice, the Big Brother voice, customer service voices, and they're all kind of bringing almost the best of audio together, because the very nature of them being voiceover artists is exactly what the medium is after. So I really like that, almost light-hearted view. And then in terms of context and kind of the right time, Google digitally over the weekend were talking about YouTube and the amazing Andrea Bocelli Easter concert. So I thought that was really, really lovely, and it's kind of like everyone's seeking out experiences and for digital to be able to enable something to kind of give people that experience at a time where they can't do anything else. It's quite nice. Special.
Very nice. Yeah, I've been rewatching Toast of London. I don't know whether that's down to the voiceovers that I'm hearing at the moment, but that still remains one of my favourites. Rhian, you've been cited, Global have been cited a couple of times there by the agency planners. Yeah, what what have you been noticing more than ever, or has come bubbled to the top of your powerful list?
I think all of the points made already are really sort of interesting and clear. And I think probably from our perspective, what's great, Mesha highlighted that you've just had this surge in listening. You know, we've seen significant, I think 30% increase on listening month on month already. So what's great is we're having more people engaging with the medium, which is great. I think the other piece that's really interesting as well is that, you know, audio, as we all know, is emotive. So when you're thinking about brands and campaigns that are running, there's no better time to be emotive in a time like this, a crisis. We've seen some great work from banks. I think that they've kind of been sort of, you know, someone like a Barclays have changed their messaging. You know, they're now running at the moment 60-second ads instead of the sort of traditional 30-second ads, and it's just a voice, no music. And I think this sort of really stands out, this type of sort of creative, because it's reassuring, it's clear messaging, it promotes a sense of community as well. And I think that that's really important in times like this. So brands like Bank, where it's a trusted, you know, very much trusted creative, is sort of is coming across really well. And I think we're seeing that from lots of different brands. We're just seeing an increase in, rather where I guess from an audio perspective, I mean, the planners may sort of say differently, but often audio is used as a medium for getting that sort of message across quickly, maybe call to action message. In this challenge where we've got, you know, dealerships and stuff, you know, you can't go to a dealership. You know, if you're an automobile, you can't go to a dealership. So actually what we're seeing is a shift from that call to action to more branding messaging. We've seen that happen really quickly. And I think that that's really important. It's great for the medium that you're seeing more brand-led messaging. And I think that hopefully that will have a kind of a long-lasting sort of impact on audio as a medium, rather than just being used often for more sort of call to action messaging. So that's a real significant shift that we've seen.
Okay, thanks for that. And we're talking mainly here about spot advertising. I've heard some people sort of talk about spot advertising is holding audio back, because you're hearing at the moment the sort of powerful host reads in podcasts being more effective, more important, and more impactful, because you've actually got, it's like, I mean, it's what radio's always done by actually having a voiceover. I mean, is that something that you'd agree with, Mesha? Or is this a time for spot advertising to take more of a back seat because it needs that pre-record and isn't as immediacy as you'd get from more of a S&P message?
Truthfully, I do think we need to start getting out of the mentality of pitting different audio strands against each other, mainly because it just doesn't benefit us at all, and it just holds us back, really. Audio should be looked at as a multimedia opportunity, and each strand can play a part in audio's effectiveness. It's okay to have an interconnecting touch point as part of our audio strategy. If we're talking about host reads in podcasts, being more effective than spot advertising, it's probably like comparing apples and pears. They have different roles. If we did want to compare the effectiveness of host reads, maybe we should do it versus, I don't know, Jamie and Amanda's breakfast show, which reaches 4.2 million people nationally. Are then podcast host reads more effective than that? We kind of go into that territory. Anyway, back to your question, I don't think it's holding audio back. Spot advertising is a gateway into other audio strands. It's a lot easier to discuss other touch points such as streaming, podcasts, and even S&P with brands who are already familiar with the benefits of spot advertising. Spot radio has a role. It creates brand relevance and trust. And let's not forget as well that for assured ROI, spot advertising is still the best, only second to TV. It still targets the right people in the right place and at the right time. And right now we are seeing one of the strengths of spot advertising. I touched on it earlier on when I spoke about Tesco's, and that's the ability to adapt messaging quickly and broadcast it at scale. So no, I don't think spot advertising is audio back. It's still our bread and butter, you know, and it just opens up a lot more opportunities in audio.
So it's the gateway drug. You say spot advertising is the gateway drug to a better overall audio advertising.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong at all with, you know, putting spot advertising on the plan, as well as digital audio, as well as podcasts. If TV and VOD and other media can do it, why can't we start looking at audio in that kind of way as well? And then we'll grow, you know, grow the media.
Rhian, from a more comms planning perspective, is that would you always see a spot as the way in, or are you managing to entice advertisers in through potentially more creative oral routes?
I think it completely depends on the advertiser in question, for sure. And I plan across all detail across all channels, and it's like we have this discussion for every single media channel. You kind of have a traditional channel, then you've got some digital counterparts. You go through this period of like, oh, I'm better, no, I'm good because of this, I can do this. Actually, I think it's less spot holding it back, and more actually the professionals around those channels holding it back. And this is where, like, I am a very an antagonistic person to be in any briefing at OMD, because I'm very challenging. And actually, I think it's kind of to the strategists and comms planners to identify what the right need state, the mood, the mindset of each of the audiences, and then really understand what the role for that channel is. And only then do you kind of understand and start unpicking where there's a role for voice, a role for podcast, a role for spot. And actually, when you bring all of that together, it's really clear what you should be doing and why. But if you get like a really, really bland women 25-54 brief, and that goes to a specialist, I mean, it's going nowhere apart from spot. So I think we've all got a responsibility to do the right strategy and kind of the comms framework up front to kind of give all of the channels the right chance to shine and how they should be shining. And like I said, it's happened between broadcast boards and online video. It's exactly the same dilemma, because from an audio point of view, a digital audio point of view, you don't have that one big spot. It's not like, I was going to say 7 million, but I think that's ambitious. 6 or 7 million people tuning into Coronation Street anymore. Actually, you've got millions of unique listens online. But if you're planning with a really traditional media planning hat on, then you would say that spot's holding audio back. But maybe there's a role for digital suppliers to kind of think a little bit like that and think about, well, is there a product that can be made that kind of aggregates all of those millions of views and lands a little bit like a hero spot? But equally, I mean, the best planning is where you've got that nice blend of message, context, and audience, when it all just works together and like the plan sings, really.
Right. So you're there. You are.
Great.
You've been given a chance there to aggregate some stuff. Global have got lots of products, and you see, radio's that historical strength that you've got in S&P combined now with the digital properties of streaming and the whole DAX proposition, the whole.
I mean, it's not to say that's the right thing. It's just.
No, I think it's an interesting point. That, again, so there's probably different ways of doing, aren't there? One of which would be to try and talk to Mesha about Tesco. If you're trying to talk to Tesco, you want more of their overall share. Would you do that as a single sales message, or are you going to do that across a number of different sales messages, or a bit of both? What's the current global view?
I mean, the key thing, and I guess a great thing about audio is there's so many different ways to connect with the listener. I guess, host reds are just one way of doing that. So are spot ads, so is S&P. I think one key thing, I guess, to mention around the spot ads is as the guy points out, is a gateway. Often brands start doing traditional spot ads, radio ads, so they're already sort of converted to audio. I think the key challenge now for innovation, stuff like DAX, is how you then take it to the next sort of level. So you kind of, the host red or the spot ads are really important. Actually, technology is making it more creative. So if you think sort of creativity isn't just standing still, you've got dynamic creative now that can take a generic spot ad but change the messaging around the time of day, the weather, location, so it can bring it to life a little bit more for a listener. You've also got stuff like 3D audio, which can create an immersive experience for a listener. So you're taking a 30-second ad, but you're also enabling it with data. You're enabling it with slightly different creative. That can then resonate better with a listener. On top of that, you've got, maybe from an audio perspective, you've got that one-on-one listening experience as well. So it's that headphone listening. So again, slightly different way of delivering a 30-second message. You can be more creative. You can use data. And that kind of builds upon that. And I think when you then look back at stuff like host read, again, you could argue that host read, you could do spot or host read rather than read in a podcast. They both play a key role. I think the importance of a host read ad and why it's becoming so sort of more, it's becoming a more popular with brands and advertisers, because as podcast scales more, you can deliver key messages to bigger audiences. So it's more probably thinking about the type of message, the fact that people listening to a podcast have actively seeked out that specific content that they want to listen to. So the real importance piece around your creative messaging within a podcast is making sure you get that right, make sure you get that right tone, because it can be very jarring when you've actively seeked out a specific type of podcast and you're hit with maybe an ad that just doesn't fit right and doesn't sit well, and this can have a negative effect on a brand. So going back to the guy's point, is absolutely part of a wider audio strategy, and you need to think it very carefully about what message you're going to deliver on what type of content, because it can kind of work for you very well. It can also have a negative effect if not done correctly.
Yeah. Marco, let's bring you in here, because Spotify's very much sold itself, not against traditional radio advertisers, and you also sell yourselves very much as a one brand product at the moment. So do you think you're closer to what Rhian is talking about in terms of delivering a hero sales proposition?
I mean, one thing I'd add just to what went before, because it is funny listening to everyone talk about it, is, I always say to when I'm talking to clients about audio, and I sort of make the comparison with the you mentioned VOD and digital video, but throw in TV generally, throw in cinema. Advertisers and brands look at all of these different visual mediums differently, right? They perform different functions. Cinema very different to digital video or a Facebook video ad, and they recognise they all perform a different function. And I think the only thing they have in common is that you use your eyes, right? And I always say the same in audio, right? The only thing that all these different platforms have in common is the fact you're using your ears, but they can all perform different roles within their marketing mix at different times with different KPIs and goals. So I think that's why I wouldn't necessarily advocate for saying everything has to be standardized, everything has to be the same. But I would say that what's important is that advertisers, and this is to me the next innovation in marketing in a screenless environment, is that brands start to see audio in these different, they see it less black and white, right? It's not, in our case, it's you don't have to have a music strategy, or you don't have to have an existing radio ad, right? This is actually really pulling from digital spend rather than necessarily radio spend. So I think that's the next ask of brands and advertisers in planning, is to understand what the different mediums can achieve.
So you still think you're pulling more budgets from digital planners than you would be from a traditional radio audience?
Well, I don't necessarily have any specific proof about it. All I'd say is you look at the market numbers, and you can see that radio is I can't remember, I haven't seen the latest, but a small increases, or it hasn't decreased. Let's just put it like that.
Right.
And yet, digital audio is growing really strongly, not just in our business, but across the board. So that money is coming from somewhere. And so I feel like there is, brands are acknowledging now that digital audio, and on Spotify, they do want to understand that the audience is behind, what they're listening to, and they do want to target in more sophisticated ways and have better reporting and so on. So they're seeing the benefits of digital audio in that perspective.
Yeah, let's just ask the agency. Mesha, again, would you agree with that point that audio is growing by taking money from the digital pot, or is it as just a stronger pot for a traditional radio? What do you think? When you're doing your channel planning now,
So
where's that growth that both Rhian and Marco are talking about? Is that client saying, I understand audio better?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. We haven't got any hardcore stats to say it's coming from digital or TV or spot radio, but what we are finding is that we are seeing clients invest more money into digital audio, and they're actually complementing digital audio with spot airtime. So it's not one or the other. They're seeing the benefits of both. I think over time we'll be able to figure out where exactly that money's coming from, but it's a bit difficult right now to have a concrete answer for that. Yeah.
Rhian, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think we have always planned, as soon as kind of digital audio happened in the market, we've always planned audio. We've not really gone, oh, this is only a spot buy, this is only a digital buy. We do, and I worked quite a lot in the first instance about what all the planning principles should be, what the percentages should be, and there's lots of science and rigor behind what that looks like. So now when we know there's a role for radio, if the client specifically wants a radio campaign, what they'll get is an audio campaign as standard. So there's not really anything new for us there. However, I would say that as kind of more and more podcasts are getting bigger listening numbers, Spotify gets more and more interesting from the ad format that you can use. Then you kind of broaden out where that inventory can be bought from and where the role can be kind of decided in. So I guess we've like doubled the number of places that you can buy audio, I guess. So you can either go through a standard radio buyer team, or you can go into digital, and they can kind of understand that Spotify or another provider can give them something extra on top of their plan that elevates their plan to something higher.
Greg, I think one of the other, just a very quick point on that, I think a couple of years ago, I think it was something like 17% of brands had audio guidelines. I think more recently it's closer to 50%, just over 50%. So I think that in itself proves that just more advertisers are engaged with audio as a medium. Whether that's coming from certain parts of it's irrelevant. The market is growing purely based on brands thinking about audio, and that can be supported by stuff like growth in podcast, growth in smart speakers, just overall growth in listening.
Have you got any brand count figures that you could share with us from global? So the number of brands using global properties over the last 3 to 5 years?
I mean, off the top of my head, I think across DAX specifically would be my area of focus. We run well over 200-300 advertisers a month of campaigns. So, that's significantly grown, and they would be any brand dipping their toe in the water to big corporate blue chip brands spending lots of money on a monthly basis. So we get such a variety of different types of advertisers and brands.
Yeah, no, we do see this on our sister Mediatel, as you'll know, runs the Jet and Audio Track systems, and again, we are seeing just an increased brand count, which I think has to be both things. It's new advertisers coming into the sector, because whether that's because of DAX or Spotify or Acast or whatever it might be, there are definitely more brands in the sector, which means the revenue has been increasing overall. Now we've managed to talk. Our voices have been going on for over half an hour now, and we've not mentioned voice at all, i.e. the voice gatekeepers. If you look at Mediatel Connected today, we've got our latest share of the voice gatekeepers, and there's some people bringing to that Amazon's Alexa's rise continues, and Google Home's likewise. Siri, which was their first, Apple have actually potentially let an early lead slip. Now, what do we think generally about these voice gatekeepers? Are they going to be a threat to the audio sector, or are they another boon, like the additional podcast streaming services? Are Alexa and Google Home, are they going to be a boon? Who wants to have a go at that? Who's got a strong view? Who's got a device in the corner of their room now that's listening to what they're saying?
I've got lots of devices around this place, and amazingly, I listen to a lot of music on them. I think we've seen in all levels of technology integrations, that at their heart, I feel like most of these companies, if you look at what people do with these connected devices, music is definitely the number one use. I think, like, for Spotify, we obviously we've got like a ubiquity strategy where we try and integrate with. We want you to be able to listen to Spotify wherever you want, and so we've just focused on ubiquity, and then at the heart of it, you've got to focus on your own product, right? We've just worked on being the world's largest streaming platform, audio streaming platform. We've got there because we've focused on helping our creators, having a good UI, good user experience for the listeners, and working with brands. If you can then get to that position, and people, the number one thing that people want is to listen to music on their speakers, then we kind of hope that we keep doing our bit of the equation, and people will demand that if they're going to buy a speaker, they can listen to Spotify on it, and it'll be more like the people are asking for it than necessarily us. And I think there's lots of we're actually seeing the opposite, where more integrations are happening. So Apple just recently, Apple integrated Spotify into Siri on the Apple Watch, right? Just one element of their ecosystem. But we're seeing those relationships go the other way, where they're recognizing that people want to listen to their, whatever their favorite music app is.
Yeah. And from the agency side, are we planning campaigns specifically, on those devices as yet, or is that still in the R&D phase?
Not specifically. I mean, I always think voice is an interesting. I'd love to work on a campaign that genuinely uses a voice-activated campaign for the benefit of the campaign, to get a genuine positive output from it. Yet to find the right brief for that. But in terms of how we plan digital audio, it's just another part of the mix. I think one of the difficulties that speakers will have, and I've got one in the corner, and I'm really concerned that she's going to start piping up if we say her name too many times. Is very nosy. Oh no, it's gone. Is the household. So because the speaker is only in the household, when you're trying to overlay data on top of that, it kind of just becomes a bit pointless and doesn't really mean anything. So planning them separately, I think at the moment is a little over ambitious. But definitely something that, if it can happen in the future, then for sure.
Okay.
Greg,
sorry. Right, I've just got to wrap up. So let's Rhian have the final word on this one.
Yeah, I think what I guess my opinion on this is that more people are consuming audio is good for the industry. I think it's the first time in years that people are putting radios back into their kitchen, to their home, to their bedrooms, which is great from an audio perspective. I think one of the other key things is just the sort of significant growth on smart speakers. I think it's over 20% now, the share of all listening hours is smart speakers. Now, in the last month or so, last 3 or 4 weeks, we've seen nearly 40% of our DAX impressions delivered onto smart speakers. So you can see that sort of massive impact this has had. So actually, whereas before it was a couple of percent 2 or 3 years ago, it's now a significant part of the sort of listening hours. And I think back to Rhian's point is nearly 80% of all listening happens while the users are in their home doing something else. So actually, this is a massive contextual opportunity for advertisers. If you think you're an FMCG brand, it's like a shopping basket that is always open. So you've got massive.
Do you try and get an car delivery off any device now? I think you do very well.
I guess there's still work to be done from brands, but I think it's just about them thinking about, again, without going into the detail of specific messaging for smart speakers, it's big enough now to deliver that sort of contextual relevant message. And we're seeing more brands doing specific smart speaker campaigns because of that very nature.
And
okay,
Greg,
thanks much. Yeah, go on, Marco. The final word. I'd always expect you to get the final word.
Well, no, it's just an additional, because you've sort of focused on connected speakers, but it's connected devices in general. So think about the car, right? And I think very specific campaigns targeting people in car when the world turns back to normal, where you know that people are actively streaming in the car. I think that's a really valuable opportunity for brands to be able to to get behind. So I think it's like there are many connected devices in many different scenarios. So I think there's loads of great creative opportunity.
Just don't get in your car today, though. Yeah.
Not today.
Stay home.
Stay safe.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. That's more than our allotted time, but I've really enjoyed that. That's a real whiz through audio today, and I look forward to hearing you and seeing you all very soon. Thanks very much.